Hi everyone, Chris here from Tennant Painting Studio, and today we're going to be showing you how we did our recent CHAPPiE Battlesuit. So the first thing we're going to do is take your miniature and assemble it. Now we did this into several components here before giving it a airbrush using Vallejo Primer Black. We're using the airbrush here and we will be using it for several other steps as it makes the job an awful lot easier. You can see here it's been mounted onto corks. This means that we can get all the way around the figure, we don't have to touch it at all, and makes undercoating the whole thing really easy. Leave that to dry for a bit and we're going to move on to our first colour, which is Vallejo Blue. This is from their Model Air range. Really quick and simple to do. We're just going to give the whole model a undercoat of this blue. Bear in mind we are keeping one of the arms separate as this will be orange later on. Next up we'll be using Vallejo Model Air French Blue. Now this gives a really nice highlight to the model. We're going to apply this pretty much all over, but focusing more on sort of a zenithal style over the Vallejo Model Air Blue. This creates a really nice solid tone, and to make sure you get that all the way around, but try to keep some of the original blue in the crevices and the recesses, give it a little bit of natural shade. Continue this on all of the parts, and once you're done just leave it to dry. Next up, you're going to be taking Lead Belcher base paint from Citadel and use this paint to apply it all over all of the metal areas, such as all of the rivets, the weapon ends, and anywhere else which is actually going to be metal at the end. Now normally Tau wouldn't use metal, however if you look at the actual CHAPPiE model itself from the film, you'll see that it actually is made out of metal and then spray painted over the top of that, so this is going to help recreate that. Once you've got all of those areas based in metal, you're ready to move on to the next step. Step is to undercoat the arm that is going to be orange. Now we used a Vallejo Space Grey primer, and after that was done and dried, we then gave it a first base coat using Flash Kits from Citadel. Again, we're using our airbrush for this, and by putting your thumb over the top like that, it allows the paint to mix with a bit of flow improver and then base coat the entire arm. This only takes a few seconds to do, and make sure you leave it to dry out properly before moving on to the next step. Once that's drying, you're then going to apply Racar Flesh, which is another base paint, onto one of the antenna on the headset. Once that's dry, you're then going to use contrast paint Gryph-hound Orange to paint over the arm, which was done with the yellow originally, and also you're going to use it to paint over the antennae you've done with the Racar Flesh. Now when doing this, the yellow didn't really work as well as I'd hoped as a base coat, and the Racar Flesh was an awful lot better, so I actually ended up using Fire Dragon Orange to colour this in. Now this took a couple of coats to get a better even coverage. Now we are going to be using an oil wash later on, which is going to hide a lot of sins there. You'll also see that this hasn't had the metal done yet. This will come a little bit later, but for right now, and you can be a little bit messy if you want. I was being overly neat considering that the oil wash will actually go into all of the lines, but once that's done, leave it to dry and you're ready to move on to the next step. Step is going to be blocking in all of that silver area that we missed previously. Again, this just takes a few minutes using the Lead Belcher paint as we did before. Now I'm going to take Citadel's Celestia Grey base paint and just paint the rocks around the feet. You'll notice we also used the Lead Belcher even to do the pipe work and the girder. It's going to be a new seat. Now we're going to give this a wash in a moment as well, This is just going to be something that's going to tie into the actual base later on, and we'll still have a oil wash over the top as well. And the wash we're using is Agrax Earthshade. Now we're just going to use this to paint this all over the base we've just done. When the oil wash goes over later on, it's going to make it even darker and stand out from the metal of the legs and the body and all the other parts. Also do this over the stonework as well, as you want to darken it right down. Now, as you can see here, we've now painted in the black. Excuse my hair being in the way all the time. I'm actually not very used to filming overhead like this. Once that's done and you've got the black in, you're now going to move on to the first stage of the weathering. By using Skavenblight Dinge and a sponge, you're going to go around all of the edges and just sponge on very lightly all the way around. This is a really quick and simple technique. Now we're going to be doing a couple of highlights on this as well, using the same sponging technique. But what you want to do is make sure you don't go overboard. Just have it almost like dry brushing, take most of the paint off of the sponge and really focus on the raised areas and the edges where the paint is most likely to chip. As I said, this is a really simple technique, but it takes a little bit of practice not to overdo it. Now, apologies, as I said, I'm not that used to going over to filming overhead, but this next highlight here that you can't see very well is black, and then finally we're going to do a highlight using a very bright silver. This silver in particular was actually Stormhost silver, from Citadel. Once that's done, you want to make sure this is a really light highlight on here. Oil wash. Now oil washing, I've taken mostly black and a little bit of brown paints, mix that in with white spirit. Now we're using pipette here to control the amount of white spirit which is actually going to be used. The white spirit I get is just from a DIY store. It costs about £1 for a large bottle. As you can see here, we're going for mostly a 3/4 of black and just about 1/4 of brown. Adjust it as you see necessary. If you look at a lot of metal in real life, you'll notice there is always going to be a slight brown patina to it, so just adding this little bit of the brown into the oil wash here is going to really help. The only thing I haven't shown you on here is before I applied the oil wash is I have also given a satin varnish to the whole model, all of the parts, and the second pot here is going to be used to wipe off the excess oil paint. Now what's going to happen here is we're going to apply a wash of this all over the entire model, but each individual part we do, we're then going to be using a Q-tip here, or cotton bud depending if you're in the UK, to actually wipe away all of the excess, leaving only the recessed areas. This creates a lovely deep shade in there. However, you do want to leave this probably overnight to really make sure it's dry. Once that's done, we're now going to take a really bright Stormhost silver again, and you're just going to paint in the lenses. Now this has had a good 24 hours to dry now, the lenses on the targeting and also the head. And we're now going to assemble by taking out first of all of the pins that were put in there originally. These are just paper clips that have been drilled and super glued in. I use a pair of pliers here, and I'm not actually using that much force. I'm actually trying to just twist the plastic out first and then remove it. It takes a little bit of time to make sure you're not doing any damage and keep a nice smooth result. I'm making a bit of a hash of this one, and I've accidentally super glued it in a little bit too far, as you can see, so you can learn from my mistakes. But eventually we do manage to get that piece off. There we go. Take all this piece off. Sometimes you don't want to risk if it's not going to come out very well, then what I would recommend is actually just get a pair of cutters and remove it that way. As you can see here, I tried to do that. In the end I gave up, took some clippers and pinged it out. Next we're going to base the model in the same way that I showed you how to rebase your figures in a previous video. There will be a link to that up the top. I'm just going to find the best position for the feet before applying super glue on both parts. You're going to want to drill the hole through. Now again, my fingers are nowhere near where the drill is going to be coming through, as you can see. Once that's done, apply super glue to both feet. Now in this case there is a base with some pipework and brick on there. You're going to make sure you put plenty of glue underneath there as well to really make sure it's going to be held in place nicely. and then you're just going to put it through that hole there and push it down to hold it in so it sticks in fast, and apply some super glue underneath. Again, this is all explained in our older video. I'll also put a link down in the description to that one so you can check that out. Now it's time to assemble the rest of the model. Now, even though this is a plastic figure, I chose to use super glue for this one, as some of the paint's already been on there, rather than filing off, because plastic glue does not go over paint very well. It can just peel it off. So use some super glue instead. These all get attached there. And I've got a very fast drying super glue as well, so I haven't got to hold it for too long. Now you want to make sure you pose the model how you want. This one's got kind of a leaning to one side sort of thing going on there. Towel legs are notorious for not being standing upright very well, which is one of the reasons why we have a little base in the back for it, but I decided not to use this because we're using the pins anyway to give it more stability. We've gone for a pointing arm here, which I think really suits the sort of pose of the model. And now I'm just going to attach all the arms, and then this model will be done. After this has been posed and stuck in, I forgot we had to actually finish off by doing the lenses. Now the lenses are done with the Games Workshop Gem Paint Spirit Stone Red, one of their technical paints. And this is really easy to do, just one of those pushes on there. Now because we highlighted the model beforehand with the Stormhost Silver, it gives a nice tint to it. And here you go, you're all done. This is the model now. The oil paint's dried nicely, it's on its base. The base has had some wire attached to it, which is then hit with typhus corrosion and then riser rust to give it a bit of a highlight. The whole thing looks really effective. Enjoy. Just a reminder, if you enjoy this kind of content, then subscribe to the channel for more. You can also consider supporting us on Patreon. Just $2 a month goes a very long way to keeping the channel going and providing new content every single week. Make sure to follow us on social media. We'll see you in the next video.